Welcome to Forensic Friday.
Where we examine the intersection of true crime, psychology, and the heart of being human in the middle of it all. Welcome, everybody, to our midweek mini.
Woohoo!
We decided that we've had so many questions about personality disorders in general
Yep.
that we're going to do a series of minis where we actually get into some of the different personality disorders.
Yep.
But we're really going to start with just kind of the overview of what even is a personality disorder, because we don't ever really talk about that. We have these labels for people, or we talk really generally, I'm a Taurus, I'm like this, I'm whatever.
Mm-hmm.
This is really the clinical foundation of what is a personality disorder. So that's what we're going to cover today.
Okay.
So, I'm taking this class, and the very first module was all about personality disorders. So that's part of what got me thinking about all of this.
Okay.
So the general definition of a personality disorder is an enduring pattern of inner experience and behavior that deviates markedly from the expectations of the individual's culture.
Hmm.
When we say like their behavior and their inner experience deviates markedly from
Uh-huh.
the expectations of the individual's culture, why does culture matter when we're talking about personality disorders?
Well, because culture, I think, creates an expectation of how we should be.
Yes. Yes. And we have to be culturally aware to do this work anyway, which is a
Yep.
constant process. It's not one class in grad school, it is a process.
Mm-hmm.
But it really matters because, for instance, in a collectivist community, right? One of the most moving things to me was when they had the big earthquake and the tsunami in Japan.
Yeah.
People just shoulder each other's burdens really beautifully over there.
Yeah.
And they will wear a mask. Way before a pandemic, they would wear a mask on the subway if they didn't feel well, just because they didn't want to affect their neighbor.
Yeah. They just don't want to make
Okay.
other people sick.
There are things I love about the American culture, that we're individuals and we strive individually, and it's a little bit competitive. And I don't have a huge problem with all of that. But we are, I'm going to buy the toilet paper before you do kind of people.
Yeah, we all race to the grocery store to beat each other.
Exactly. So
Mhm.
if you, and I might help my family, I might help my people, but I'm not going to give my toilet paper necessarily away to somebody that I don't know.
Right.
It's a little bit of a different focus in a different culture. So, for instance, if I had a Japanese client who maybe they have a really great job, but they're sharing that with every single member of the family. Maybe there's multiple generations living there. An American mindset might be, hey, we need some boundaries. We need to
Mm-hmm.
have some of these younger folks need to get jobs, like they need to contribute. We might think of that Japanese person as dependent.
Right.
You could even maybe label them in an American context as dependent personality disorder. They might have some of those traits or something like that.
Yeah.
You put an American walks into a Japanese therapist's office. Well, what kind of diagnosis might we get? Just baseline. And we come in and we're just being our normal, just midline culture self.
Manic.
Man, we might get a bipolar diagnosis.
Yeah.
We're all narcissists. I
Valid.
guarantee you, just based
To
on sitting
them.
there with my hot pink hat and I'm doing my thing,
Right.
my brand on it. Like I don't, and these are like gross generalities, but you get the
Right.
picture,
I
right?
do.
The culture matters. And so
Yeah.
for something to be pathological, it really has to deviate from the cultural context.
Yeah.
Right? That's important. That also affects the prevalence of different disorders in different cultures and worldwide, which is something we're going to talk about a little bit, which is
Mhm.
fascinating. Okay. So in this training that I'm in, we're talking about psychopathy. We're really talking about a few personality disorders in particular.
Mhm.
One of the things that he went into that's really helpful is the 5-factor model of personality, which you probably saw in passing in grad school. I know I did in passing,
Mhm.
but it was different to really sit with it. So I thought it would be fun to go over that a little bit.
Yeah.
So the 5-factor model of personality basically talks about personality as a collection of
Mm-hmm.
behaviors in different categories. And so I can already hear Preston. I know we put people in categories, blah, blah, blah. He's not wrong. But actually, there's some research behind some of these categories.
Yes.
And it's really helpful because this is part of how we assess some
Mm-hmm.
of the personality disorders. So we're going to start with the first factor.
Okay.
I love this one. This one's one of my favorites. Neuroticism. Neuroticism is one of the facets and factors of our personality. If you have high neuroticism,
Mm-hmm.
you have what they call emotional lability, which means you're up and down. Like you have
Okay.
a range, and sometimes it changes more rapidly than other people's.
Right.
Some shamefulness or more prone to shame, more depressivity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the feelings are bigger. That's what I
Right.
would say.
Right.
Low neuroticism, like if it was a continuum, is
Mm-hmm.
fearlessness, but also some degree, a lot of times, of like shamelessness.
Okay.
Probably a little bit
Yeah.
lower on the guilt experience, that kind of stuff. Maybe a little steadier on the emotions.
Yeah.
Okay. Extroversion, high excitement seeking, high attention seeking. Low extroversion is maybe some social withdrawal and detached coldness.
Mm-hmm.
So now this is a continuum. So it's not like you're high or low extroversion. You're somewhere on this continuum,
Right.
but typically you're somewhere on that continuum. And if you're towards the high, high or the low, low, you might be having some features of personality disorders. Does that make sense so far?
Makes total sense.
Okay. So we have neuroticism,
Okay.
extroversion. Third one is openness. High openness is like a little bit more magical thinking, a little more eccentric.
Mm-hmm.
Low openness, maybe inflexible, close-minded.
Yeah.
Okay. Agreeableness, high would be submissive, maybe selfless, gullible.
Okay.
Low would be deceitful, manipulative, callous.
Okay.
That'd be low agreeableness. And then conscientiousness. High would be maybe perfectionism, workaholism, that kind of stuff is highly, highly conscientious.
Mm-hmm.
Low would be distractibility, irresponsibility, rashness, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Makes total sense.
And this five-factor model crosses culture.
Right.
So what this means is when they study this, this is actually true all over the world.
Hmm.
People are on these continuums.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether or not it's pathological, we still have to consider which culture they're in.
Mm-hmm.
But these traits transcend culture.
Right.
And you really, again, want to think of it as a spectrum. It's a continuum.
Which we'll get into this later for another mini, but I was doing some research on one of the personality disorders,
Yeah.
and that's one of the big things, right? It's a
Yeah.
continuum, it's a spectrum of different things.
It's most personality disorders affect more than one of these domains and
Mm-hmm.
many personality traits.
Mm-hmm.
And the personality disorder must reflect personal deviance, not merely social deviance.
Hmm.
So what that means is there's an element of insight that needs to be there. And when
Mm-hmm.
you look at several of the personality disorders, the way they think of themselves is not congruent with the way other people see them.
Hmm.
So that incongruence is actually a personal deviance too.
So it's low self-awareness.
Low self-awareness. Yep.
Mm.
So when you look at that, that's really that criterion A that we talk about is we are having like a disconnect. We are not meeting the expectations we would have for somebody in this cultural reality, right?
Right.
Criterion B is it has to be enduring, which means it's inflexible and pervasive across a broad range of situations.
Okay.
Okay, so what that means is obviously it's lasted a long time. It doesn't come and go for
Mm-hmm.
long periods of time. Criterion C is this is true for most of our disorders,
Mm-hmm.
leads to distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other areas of functioning. And then who determines that? Well, oftentimes family, friends, clinician,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then the person's self-report.
Yeah.
But that's important with personality disorders because not all folks with personality disorders understand that they're having distress.
Mm-hmm.
the people around them realize they're having distress,
Yeah.
right? Criterion D is stable and of long duration, which we've sort of talked about. And then criterion E, not better explained as a manifestation or consequence of another mental disorder. So there
Hmm.
can be comorbidity where we can have two things.
Hmm.
People can even have the traits of more than one personality disorder. We can have a cluster,
Yeah.
but it's not, this behavior cannot be limited to episodes of acute mental health problems.
Right.
If it only happens then, it is not a personality disorder,
Correct. Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And then criterion not attributable to the physiological effects of a substance or a medical condition.
Yeah.
If it's only there because of a medical condition, or if it comes and goes with a medical or a physiological condition, then it is not a personality disorder.
Yes. I think it's super helpful for our listeners to understand a few things. One, not everyone has a personality disorder. So just because someone's having an off day,
Yes,
an off week, or an off season, or whatever, doesn't mean that they necessarily are diagnosable with a personality disorder. And two, I think it's helpful for our listeners because we might refer to some of these things in our cases, which we already have,
absolutely. Yes, that's why
right?
we're getting questions.
Yeah, because in our field, especially with some of the population we work with, we do see more of this. We see a higher percentage, even though the percentage of personality disorders are lower, we
Yes,
see more of them.
yes. Well, and the other thing too is I want to be very clear. Labeling people in this way is rarely helpful, especially if you're just putting that on somebody else. I think there's a place for this in therapy to really talk
Yes.
with folks about what they're showing up with. But we got to be really careful. And you don't have to be on TikTok for more than 5 seconds before we're throwing around borderline, narcissism,
Narcissism,
histrionic,
all of that.
all of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And the narcissism thing, I had people coming into my office for a while. This is pretty funny, actually. And everybody was a narc. I would have these women in particular were coming in and saying, my husband is a narc. And I'm like, your husband like sold secrets to the government? Like, I'm trying to think, narc, what are you
That's
talking about?
not what
They
that
sold on
means.
somebody? Like, I don't understand. And they're like, no, 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 a narcissist.
Oh my gosh, I cannot with that.
That's and covert
Right.
versus overt. And I'm sitting here going, oh my gosh, when we talk about sociopaths and psychopaths, same thing, different term.
Yeah.
Psychopathy is not a personality disorder. People might say psychopathic personality disorder because it almost made it into the DSM. I think it will be in the next version of the DSM. Personality disorders are very different from that. So that's part of what's unique about it. This covert narcissism, I had to dig kind of deep. Wouldn't you know there's a book? It's a tiny book. It's now on my shelf because I was like, I'm going to know what the people
Of
know.
course. Yep.
And it's covert narcissist something or another. I'll put it on our website. I don't know if it's a must read or not yet, but I do know that women for a year and a half would come in and every single husband was a narcissist to some degree.
One, I work more with men, so I hear that more from men that
Yes.
their ex-wife or ex-partner or whatever is a
Yes.
narcissist. So
Well, and we hear borderline from men too, like where men will come in and
yeah,
go, I looked up borderline
but
personality disorder.
I hear more narcissism right now.
Hmm.
Used to hear more borderline. Now I hear
Yes.
more narcissism from men. And here's
Yes.
the thing, and we're going to get into this when we break down each of these personality disorders because y'all, they're
Yeah.
so fascinating.
Yes.
However, not everyone's a narcissist. They might have traits that are
Oh,
narcissistic or super selfish or very self-absorbed,
yep.
but it doesn't necessarily mean, people's defenses look similar
Yeah.
to someone who might be responding out of a personality disorder.
And everyone who's been hurt is going to have an instinct to protect themselves.
Yes.
Hence, defense mechanism. It's coming from somewhere a lot of the time. Now, there is a genetic component, but also environmental, right? So, I want to drop a couple of prevalence statistics on you because I think they are
Okay.
fascinating. Overall in America, this is an
Hmm.
American sample.
Hmm.
What percentage, because I did not know, okay? What percentage of Americans do you think meet the criteria for at least one personality disorder?
Of Americans,
Hmm.
um, 25%.
Ooh, that's high, but I usually think it's a little higher than
Yeah.
14.9% of people
Okay.
18 plus, right? Which personality disorder should be 18 plus because it's an enduring pattern. We don't want to be diagnosing that in teenagers. Teenagers don't know their ass from their elbow.
Right. Exactly.
So 9.1% is typically what's thought of worldwide prevalence, but they're thinking now it's actually more like 8% worldwide.
Oh,
But in
okay.
America, 14.9%, which is 30.8 million people.
Wow.
That's crazy. And these are old statistics. These are 2004 statistics.
So it's probably higher.
It is probably higher now. But these were like formal good sample statistics. So that's why I'm
Yeah.
using these, but I'm still trying to find some more recent.
They might be still trying to do like a long-term study on it.
Yes. So when you look at narcissism, and this is 2022 numbers,
Mhm.
this was a good study with numbers.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Only 1 to 2% of the population has narcissism in
Hmm.
America. 1 to 2%. And they actually think that might be as low as 0.5% in the general population
Hmm.
and as high as 2 to 16, which is quite a range. 2
Sure.
to 16% of people who are seeking help.
Yeah.
So that means out of 100 people in the general population, you just pick up random people and put them in a line,
Hmm.
half of one person is a clinical narcissist. Okay? Let's
Yeah.
talk about some of the other ones.
Okay.
Because for how much we talk about narcissism, it is actually probably the least or second to least common.
Wow.
Isn't that wild?
I'm not that surprised, actually.
Because the clinical criteria is pretty intense for
Yeah.
narcissism, which we'll get
Yeah.
into a different day.
Yep.
Okay, so again, this is 2004 statistics, borderline 1.4%.
Okay.
Borderline is one that we throw around all the time.
Yep.
4.4% paranoid personality disorder, which was 9.2 million people in 2004.
Okay.
3.6% antisocial. That's 7.6 million people in America in 2004.
Wow.
That number, I believe, has gone up, and I will
Oh,
try to
I believe
find the
that too.
most recent, right?
Yeah.
3.1% schizoid,
Okay.
2.4% avoidant, 1.8% histrionic,
Hmm.
and then dependent is real low. It's like 1 million people ish, something like that.
Okay.
Have dependent, which I almost never see that one clinically.
Oh, yeah.
It's usually better accounted for with someone who's also using substance abuse or
Yeah.
experiencing codependency in a relationship like that.
Yeah.
The most prevalent in the United States of America in 2004
Hmm.
was obsessive compulsive personality disorder,
Hmm.
affecting 164.4 million people.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So there's a huge number of people, I shouldn't say huge percentage, huge number of people in our country suffering from at least one personality disorder. That is a lot of people.
Yeah.
So when we're throwing around labels and all this kind of stuff, we really just need to think this is a mental health condition.
Hmm.
The people suffering from it are on a continuum in terms of how much they know
Yeah.
about what they're suffering from. And kind of like addiction, these folks get mistreated. They mistreat people sometimes, but they also get
Hmm.
mistreated quite a bit and they're vulnerable. And so as we enter some of these conversations in the next couple of weeks about specific personality disorders, I think it's important that we get on the same page about doing it with some kindness and some compassion for people who just are not understood very
Hmm.
well. And they're not understood very well because A, their behavior sucks
Hmm.
many times, and B, they don't know how to talk about it. They either lack the skills or don't have the capacity to talk about it.
Yeah.
So if we talk about autism and somebody may or may not have the ability to verbally express themselves,
Hmm.
if you look at somebody who has narcissistic personality disorder, they may have a reduced capacity to communicate as well. Theirs
Right.
just looks different
Right.
and it affects people in a different way. And so we tend to have less compassion for it. So my sincere hope, and we're going to laugh because I got to tell you, narcissists can be funny. They can
Oh,
be infuriating. I mean,
yeah.
we're going to talk about it. It matters. The damage
Yeah.
that they can cause and
Hmm.
create is real, right?
Hmm.
But we're also going to have compassion for any person who's
Yes.
struggling from a mental health condition.
Yes. I'm so excited for us to dive into each of these, especially the like hot topic ones,
Uh-huh.
because they're so misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
They are so misunderstood.
They're
And
misunderstood
doesn't mean that when they do poor behaviors or power and control behaviors that it's excused at all.
at all.
Right. And they're also very misunderstood. That does not mean it's up to people in their lives to necessarily try to quote unquote treat them like therapists.
No, no.
That is our job.
It is our job. And it is, quite frankly, our specialty. We have a bit of a specialty, particularly with narcissism and borderline, I would say.
Yeah.
You and I we have some chops in this. We're not the experts, but we know a fair bit.
Yeah.
Lots of lived experience treating these clients
Yeah.
over a really long time. So we'll talk a little bit in the coming episodes about how to treat these different disorders and also how they show up in couple and family relationships.
Hmm.
And so how can you be a good family member to somebody who's narcissistic or borderline or has traits of paranoid personality disorder or there's schizoid personality disorder is a tough one.
Yeah. And also be able to like create boundaries and know what is good for you and what's not good for you based on these relationships.
And one of the things I can tell you just straight right off the bat, consistency with these folks matters the most. And so if you can learn some skills to regulate yourself and to be
Yes.
consistent and steady, you actually can help someone manage their behavior, but also manage yourself
Hmm.
while you're helping someone else manage their behavior using
Yeah.
boundaries, etc.
Yes. Yes. Well, I'm excited.
I know.
The next one will be the one that I'm going to go over, which we're going to have fun with that one.
Natalie's taken on borderline personality disorder, y'all. That's going to be our first personality disorder episode where we're actually going to get into the nitty
Yes.
gritty.
Get ready.
All right. Well, thanks for joining, y'all. And I hope that this gives you a better understanding of personality disorders. And as always,
We love you, our forensic friends.
bye, guys.
Bye.
I'm Janine.
And I'm Nat.
And as always, thanks for listening and join us next week for more crime, psychology, and heart.